So hope these things are visible, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, so good morning, you all.
Can you explain both accounts?
Yeah, I think there is a problem. I think let me see. Yeah. All right. So we have already discussed in the last class what are the content of this course, and today I want to take you through a historical background. Why this course is very important and why we should learn this course. So, kind of, I just put down a title like Photonic Integrated Circuit, Past, Present, and Future. And I am not sure whether I will be able to finish by today. I may need another class, but these are the outline. So, first of all, bit of background history, introduction. Mostly, I'll be discussing how transistor to integrated CMOS electronics evolved, and there are some kind of bottleneck in integrated circuit, and that is why this topic, this subject, silicon photonics technology came out, and that is with the potential for co-integrating your electronics as well as photonics. And mainly the silicon photonics technology was targeted in early days for optical interconnect solution, just to overcome the electrical interconnect bottleneck. But now, since technology is becoming more and more mature, there are many more applications are coming out. So I will just take you through some of the advanced application for silicon photonics technology. For example, microwave photonics, quantum optics, and lab-on-chip medical applications. And some overview, maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes, I will be just discussing about what we have done so far at IIT Madras for this photonic integrated circuit research. Okay. So then, all right. So thing is that so to understand completely and to basically to appreciate this subject or this course, I thought of just taking you through some of the early stage research of electronics. That is actually invention of transistor. I think most of you may be knowing this, but for completeness, I thought of just considering just to discuss here. You know, it was in 1925, the first patent, namely the method and apparatus for controlling electric currents, was filed. Patent was filed. That was in Canada. So scientist Julius Edgar Lilienfeld. Okay, but unfortunately, he did not publish any papers on this topic, so the knowledge was not much disseminated. That's why it was mostly ignored by the industry that time. So then in 1947, 1948, transistor discovered, you know, this three grades, Shockley, Brattain, and Bardeen. These are the three guys here, shown here in Bell Labs. They demonstrated the first transistor, and that was in germanium sample. Germanium as a semiconductor, and it was size is in the order of 1 centimeter. And you can see on the right, there is another one replica, again fabricated after 50 years of just to celebrate 50 years of transistor development, and that was again displayed here in a class chart. It is shown here. Okay, and then if you see, once the transistor was discovered, then people thought of how to make something that transistor, trans resistor, so you can have some kind of electron flow control. And using that thing, if we can go for some kind of integrating more number of transistors and some kind of complex functionality. Okay, so this Dahmer idea of integration presented at the conference in Washington in 1952. So about, you can think of 70 years ago. So he said that with the advent of the transistor and the work on conductors generally, it now seems possible to envisage electronic equipment in a solid block. So just in a solid block, you can make some kind of circuit, and you don't need any external wire connecting. So internal wiring can be done also. So you can visualize integrated circuits. Okay, so that goes on 1957. Just idea is not enough. He just showed things can be possible with logical argument. He was a theorist with a logical argument. He again just came out with a model for flip-flop integrated circuit. So again, he just commented, it seemed so logical to me. We had been working on smaller and smaller components, improving reliability as well as size reduction. I thought the only way we could ever attain our aim was in the form of solid block. So that is what he thought it is feasible. That was way back in 1957. Okay, then just a few claims. So about the transistor. So transistor to integrated CMOS electronics, how evolved. So you know that integrated circuit, Jack Kilby, he demonstrated in so-called germanium integrated circuit. I think 2 or 3 circuit was actually integrated on a chip. You see, this is the IC that time. Okay, that's a first Kilby demonstrated circuit that happened in 1959-1961. And later on, Robert Noyes, he demonstrated first silicon integrated circuit with metal interconnect. You see, it's nice. There it is also, I think, a 3 transistor was integrated together to have some kind of information transfer or signal transfer, something like that. So you can imagine that this is the size, in centimeter size. So it has own merit why people moved from germanium to silicon, because germanium has a lot of, I think later on you might have learned that it's a temperature problem, as well as what we call that reverse saturation current, everything very, very high, noisy. So silicon is less noisy, so that's why people moved slowly from germanium to silicon. All right. And then, 1965, this famous Gordon E. Moore, who is the co-founder of Intel and Fairchild Semiconductor. So he just noted all the study, research, investigation since that time, till that time, and he just plotted a nice curve here. You see, it is shown 1962, 1965, and then 1970. But this he was reporting in 1965 paper. So the paper name is "Cramming More Components onto Integrated Circuits." That is the title of the paper. Okay. So 1965. That means he got data from 1962 and 1965. 1970 he was predicting. So this is actually the number of components per integrated circuit, x-axis. Okay, and then y-axis actually relative manufacturing cost per component. So this is the cost. Y-axis is the cost, and x-axis is the number of components. You can imagine that it's kind of parabolic in nature. If you just pick only 1962 curve, see, if you just increase the number of components, so the cost reduces first, and beyond a certain number, if you just try to see, the cost is again increasing. So you have some certain, that means they suggest that you can get some kind of economic condition, cheap, cost-effective condition up to some number of, that is actually around 10 number of components. That is in 1962. Now, if you move to 1965, that number goes up close to 100, and 1970 close to 100, right? Yeah, 100, and then 1970 it was close to 1000 or something like that. This is the thing. And he just started plotting that it is really possible by the technological advancement that every 24 months number of integrated electronic device can be doubled in a given area with cost-effective way. So that is famously known as and celebrated one, Moore's law, and that went on for several years. And later on, it was revised that instead of 24 months, it could be doubled 18 months, every 18 months, and it could continue, and that is still being continued till recent times. But you will find that there are some problems. Okay. So this is something I think very difficult to read. I tried to put as large as possible the single figure entire slide. So this is what x-axis shows that year, and y-axis shows the transistor count on a single chip. Okay. So, and you see those dots, those are values, and some tiny letters written therein. They are actually different companies, industry. Okay. So it's once the IC transistor, everything was very good, good in shape, and it was found that industrially viable. Then a lot of companies started working on that, and they produced more and more complicated integrated electronic circuit for different functions, and they named a different chip names, etc. And you see, till recent time, it was shown up to 2018 here. So 2018, I think it is all about 10. It says 1,000 million billion. So 10 billion transistor. You can make it full screen. Okay, maybe that is better. Okay, fine. So this is better. Yeah. So here you can have this thing. This just shows how it is successful transistor to integrated CMOS electronics. Okay. So till 2018, the data is there. But at the same time, this is possible because of the advanced technology, CMOS technology came in. And then at the same time, people looked at details that how far we can go in this way. Okay. So here, one example, this is more or less, it is a schematic one, but it gives you a lot of insight. So as I said that this number of transistor could be increased up to billion, 10 billion, right? Today, if you see some kind of graphical processor unit or some games card or something like that, you need really that many number of transistor to be integrated for all type of functions, processing, memory, all those type of things. Yeah. So that is possible because of the technology advancement. That means how small feature size you can fabricate on a chip. That can be silicon, right? So that if transistor size, for example, if it is being reduced smaller and smaller, you can fabricate smaller transistor size. So you can actually make more number of component together. Your cost will be reduced, and that is how Moore's law was going on. Here it is shown that this x-axis is the technology node. Okay. So technology node means, for example, industry is setting standard that, okay, currently this is our technology, and next target is that we should move to another advanced technology where we can fabricate even smaller transistor. So based on that, actually technology node was defined. Here it is started from 0.65 micrometer technology. So 650 nanometer technology. That means your transistor size can be that much. For example, if it is a MOS, that means it is a source to drain length, channel length, you mean to say, or sometimes it is called one transistor to another transistor, how small pitch you can have in your fabrication. That is actually so-called technology node. So, as you keep on reducing your transistor size, two things happens. So smaller the transistor size, then again, what you have to do, you have to because they can be closer and closer, and once they are becoming closer and closer, you need to connect one transistor output to another input of the another transistor. So your interconnect also should be scaled accordingly. So that is one problem. That's one problem, means one additional thing you have to think. Only transistor size reduction is not enough. So if you want to integrate them more and more numbers, then you need to actually have scaled so equivalent scaling of your interconnect. So two things happens, that whenever your interconnect length is smaller, so you can send the signal very fast also. That is one thing. And another thing is that your transistor size smaller, that means your latency in your transistor, that means input to output, whenever you are giving an input signal in the transistor, and how fast you are getting the response out of the transistor, that is actually transistor so-called delay, or here it is called as a gate delay. Here it is mentioned, that is gate delay. So if you just increase advanced the technology, it is come down to, here it is shown up to 90 nanometer technology, then gate delay, it's linearly falling. It's obvious, because your length of information travel, response time, all these RC so-called inbuilt, inherent capacitance, resistance, all those type of things can be reduced, and gate delay can be reduced. That is good. So that means that delay, response time, delay means response time smaller, means you can switch on and off very fast. So faster operation you can do. So at the same time, if you see the interconnect delay means, so as a function of length, you can consider normalized length, for example, for a certain length, how much time it takes. For example, interconnect means it is kind of transmission line. So in the transmission line, how much time it takes to flight from one output to another input. So that is actually called interconnect delay. So it is just shown copper as a transmission line hot wire, and the surrounding low K, low dielectric constant material if you just use, then that is copper. And if you just see that, and another one, it is shown as aluminum. If the metal is used as aluminum and silicon dioxide, two things it is shown. So as you keep on, as you go for advanced technology node, your feature size of the interconnect can be reduced. So the consequence is that whenever your transmission line width, thickness is being reduced, you can imagine that when cross section is reduced, that resistance will be increased. Okay, and not only that, resistance increasing, also whenever you are just cramming more and more transistors together, your interconnect lines are also cramming closer and closer. So that means if you are activating one transmission line, surrounding field will infringe into the neighboring interconnect lines. So that will cause some kind of interference of kind of fringing capacitance. So that means as a whole, your RC constant is going to be somehow hampered. So that is why your interconnect delay increases as you go for advanced technology. It is shown here. So here it is after 180 nanometer technology, you see slope changed. That slope changed because whenever you are transmitting transmission line, your feature size is smaller and smaller, some kind of quantum effects comes into picture, and quantum limit is there. So that actually causing some another slope. So that is actually worse. Okay, that is happening. So let us concentrate this as you go for technology advancement. One is actually going in a negative direction, another is going in a positive direction. But what you have to do, you have to see overall effect, overall speed if you want to see. So you have to add up interconnect delay as well as a gate delay to see how the performance is. So this is the green line, if you see. So in the green line, again up to 180 nanometer because of this. So it is actually all was well that it was reducing together. But beyond 180 nanometer technology, you see it's a slowly started again increasing. That is actually called the that is mainly because of the interconnect, not because of the transistor size reduction. Transistor size reduction is always helpful. So that is because of the interconnect. That's why it is called interconnect bottleneck, famously known as interconnect bottleneck, electrical interconnect bottleneck. So that is the problem. Okay. So now because science engineers, all this, they started thinking how to overcome this type of situation. So they come up with a idea that okay, vertical integration of interconnect layers. So instead of just planar, you can think about vertically different layers, several layers you can use in your integrated electronic circuit, so that you can somehow can get rid of this interconnect bottleneck thing. So here some example is given. I have just taken some paper published in 2001. It's a nice paper to read. So if you see in the bottom layer, all this electronic circuitry is there, all the transistors will be there. Now if you want to suppose connect just a neighboring transistor, okay, then you can have your dimension smaller. Even though your cross section, resistance, pitch, all those type of thing is increasing, RC constant increasing, but you have to travel only shorter length. But sometimes in a whenever you are talking about a large number of integrated transistors, billions of transistors, you may need to distribute them in clusters, because all coming together one after another and with equal speed, I think that is not so good, because heat energy will be dissipated, that will be affecting overall performance of the all transistors. So that's why sometimes one particular class of transistor can be grouped together, and you can have some kind of functions, and that function output response can be taken out, and we can have another cluster of transistors, group of transistors for another particular function. You can connect them so that you can go for a little bit longer length, so that heat management also will be good. That is how it is actually the planar circuit, integrated circuit was being developed at that time. So what happens when you are talking about a little bit longer distance to communicate within the chip? Say instead of just a nanometer scale, just you are thinking about some few micron, even hundreds of micron, for example, something like that. So in that case, longer distance. So longer distance means longer delay. So longer delay, you cannot afford really smaller cross section of the interconnect. So in that case, you can increase the cross section for that type of communication. So what they did just vertically, they just put different layers of dielectric, and you take a bias, and you can have some kind of local interconnect. This is white region is actually bias, so-called bias. So if you are communicating just a neighboring transistor, you can have smaller metal wiring. Okay. Now if you want to go for a little bit longer distance, so vertically you go up and you increase your cross section, and then that cross section, higher cross section interconnect, you can use for little longer distance communication, data transfer. And then for the intermediate, you can go even up, little bit above through via, and cross section can be increased, so that you can manage your delay. And then you can have global, if you want to go for millimeter length communication or so you can do that. So this technology also developed. It is well established in CMOS industries. Nowadays, people are talking about 7 different layer of metal, and sometimes people are thinking about 9 different type of metals. That those are actually currently in place in the silicon electronics industry. However, so even for that, there is a limitations. Here is some study. Also, I have taken from this paper. So if you see that feature size, our intention is that feature size, if it is bigger, then interconnect delay will be smaller. That is true, because RC constant, what I was talking about. So feature size is here it is in the reverse order. So this feature size, you can imagine that is correspond to your technology node. Okay, suppose you are considering, even if you are going for smaller technology node for the transistor level, but for interconnect, you can fabricate with that technology, but with that feature size, bigger feature size. Here it is shown representative two different length of the interconnect. One is 5 millimeter, another is 3 millimeter. So this is 5 millimeter, and this is 3 millimeter. So if your cross section is increasing, starting from point here, it is about 0.25 micron to up to 3 micron, it is shown. Feature size means cross section, that the height width. So that feature size, if you are just increasing, then your interconnect delay, obviously, it will be reduced because of the resistance, all other thing, impedance particularly, it will be reducing, it is coming down. So for 3 millimeter also, it is shown scaled accordingly. But as you keep on increasing your feature size, you see, it is not really that much sharply falling, it is almost getting saturated. Even for 3 millimeter or 5 millimeter also almost saturating. Obviously, your gate delay also will be increasing, but gate delay you want to maintain at smaller things, so that gate delay is as usual less. So that is again a problem in this things. If you just consider here, but this is the delay, but this length, and this is the delay time. If you are considering, then if you just calculate your phase velocity for any signal, that is actually reduced to that is stuck at c/6. C is the velocity of light. Okay, so you cannot really increase much velocity. You cannot work on that. Velocity is limited by the material system and the conductor and dielectric system, how electromagnetic wave propagating through the transmission line, that you have to count. All those they are taught in electromagnetic field course. Some of you might have learned that. So that is one thing. Not only this velocity, if you want to switch on and off, for example, you are sending digital data 100, how fast you can move, how fast you can transmit. That is also that switching on and off in the interconnect also. That means how fast you can activate and inactivate. So that thing also, it is limited by the bandwidth. The transmission line, as you know, that is the bandwidth limited. So that means you cannot really modulate signal at a higher rate. Even if you modulate at a higher rate, it cannot respond. Your transmission line, that interconnect cannot respond properly. So that's a huge problem actually. Okay, so what is the solution? So it is not really actual solution, but here for certain application, people thought like this. Okay, you see, the vertical integration. So vertical integration, as I said, that you can have, say, metal layer 1, metal layer 2, metal layer, so on, all these 6 metal layers will be there. And in the bottom layer, you can have all the transistor for microprocessing purpose. And then you can have vias, you can connect where you want to integrate all the memory. Memory means 1 bit means 1 transistor, basically 1 capacitive transistor get how much charge you are storing. So that memory layer is this one. And then you can process, store, process back and forth. You can just get your information back and forth through vias. And also you can have one transistor which will be used for your electrical to optical conversion. So electrical data, it can be some kind of transistor laser type things. So you can have all the data can be converted into optical data. So input output, so that once it is optically converted, so you can use your fiber. Okay, so that concept, fiber means optical fiber. Whenever you are using, that means optical frequency, very high frequency. So you can actually send many more at a higher speed or higher speed. If not at a higher speed, then you can also multiplex different channels, different wavelength. So DWDM type things you can get. So you can have optical waveguide, or that velocity, phase velocity can go up to C, and the frequency is 200 terahertz. And if it is a waveguide, then bandwidth is enormous. So you can go up to almost infinite bandwidth if your receiver and transmitter and supports that thing. Okay, so unlimited bandwidth. It's because terahertz frequency is, carrier frequency is terahertz, so your modulation frequency can be as high as possible, as long as your things supporting device system transceiver is supporting. So that was the one thing. And you know, because of this type of thing, optical fiber communications, etc., huge success in 1980s, and that's why we get higher bandwidth, and we are teaching also online. You can imagine that without any delay, you are getting everywhere all across the world. Okay, so now I want to take you to some other aspects also. So that is what the story, how slowly electronics industry was looking for optical solutions, because it has its own limitations, own bottleneck. So they are looking for something so that some optics may be some kind of, where there is a limitation, optical solution can be helpful. Okay, but at the same time, people, those who are working in optics domain, so they were thinking that if electron flow, electron control can give so much outcome, why not thinking about photon? Because that time quantum mechanics, everything came out, and light wave was found to be the it's a kind of stream of quantum particle like photons, etc. So if you can control photon, even if it is not quantum, it is just electromagnetic wave, light wave, if you can control, if you have some kind of circuitry so that light wave can be controlled on chip, so you can get equivalent application completely. And in that case, you may not need also all these little electronics things, all optical communication, all optical signal processing, everything can be done. You can devise a certain kind of circuitry also. So with that concept, exactly with that concept, A.C. Miller in Bell Lab, he came out with an idea of integrated optics. That's just analogous to integrated electronics. Okay. So in this paper, he was just proposing, that is in 1969. You know, 1969 means the laser was invented in around 1957 or something like that. So source is there, artificial source, high quality laser light could be fabricated. Then why not using laser circuitry? Okay, that is what I wanted to. I like what that time in 1969, what people thought about integrated optics in a proposal level. You see, this paper outlines a proposal for a miniature form of laser beam circuitry. Laser beam circuitry, you can imagine that circuitry is borrowed from electronics. Okay, so laser beam, you want to control laser beam, you can guide laser beam. So that is what is possible if index of refraction changes of the order of 10 to the power minus 2 or 10 to the power minus 3. You say refractive index of glass is about 1.5, refractive index of water is around 1.3, and so on. Air is refractive index 1, but in a material medium locally, if you just change a refractive index in the order of 0.001 or 0.01 or 0.001, 10 to the minus 2 and 10 to the minus 3, in a substrate such as glass, allow guided laser beams of width near to 10 microns. Just rough calculation is showed that if you change a refractive index locally with a cross section of about 10 micron, and that refractive index change is about 10 to the minus 2 to 10 to the minus 3, then light wave can be confined within that due to total, that's the principle is total internal reflection. So light wave can be confined, and as long as you maintain the cross section, light wave will be guided. So that is how optical waveguide concept came in. And once you have optical waveguide, that is analogous to conductor, electrical conductor, electron conductor, transmission line. So there you can actually think of making a optical circuitry. Okay, so that was the proposal that came out of Bell Lab. And then and there, I think one more, I will come back to this story again back, but in the meantime, in 1970, I think that there's a breakthrough results happens because of the heterostructure, semiconductor heterostructure. So you know, semiconductor heterostructures it's got a huge success for electronics industry, for high power electronics, high power applications. And that heterostructure is nothing but some kind of quantum well structures, and that also used for laser source, light source purpose, optoelectronic application purpose. And that's why in 2000 there was a Nobel Prize. So Alfarov, he got a Nobel Prize for the optoelectronic part, and Harvard for semiconducting heterostructure, high-speed electronics. So high-speed optoelectronics. Okay, they are getting Jack S. Kilby also for his part in the invention of the integrated circuit. So that 2000 was shared by all these people. All right, so that means you could actually efficiently. You could actually, before that laser diode was demonstrated, that so that from the electrical energy you can actually convert photon, and you can emit laser light, light emitting diode. You can demonstrate also laser diode. All those things were also demonstrated, but with the heterostructure it was found that it will be more efficient actually. You can scale it down and you can reduce the threshold if you improve the design. All those type of things came out, and that was a huge success. And that happened in 1970, but recognized in 2000 Nobel Prize. Okay, and that I was talking about A.C. Miller. In 1969 he proposed, and in 1972, that means I am talking about just 50 years ago from today. That time he came out that within the 3 years after proposal, people started working on. Then he has to come up with for writing another review paper that is called a survey of integrated optics. What he was proposed in 1969, after 3 years, what progress happened is a survey. So that was a proposal, and in 1972 he found that people already demonstrated planar waveguide structure. So the surface layer refractive index change could be done, and also mechanism how a prism can help to couple light into the substrate layer. Maybe there will be loss, but there will be some coupling will be there, and you can actually couple that light into another substrate also, which is having another surface layer refractive index change. So that is how first time planar optical waveguide also demonstrated. And it was also analyzed that if you make this type of structures like kind of heterostructure, higher refractive index region, this black region, and both sides lower refractive index region, then light can be confined. This is lower refractive index region, this is lower refractive index, and this black region is higher refractive index region. So light can be confined. It is similar to like that of quantum well, how electrons are confined in a quantum well. So here also people thought that okay, if you make this type of structure, that is like a higher refractive index region is nothing but a quantum well for photon. So in that case, the photon wave you can actually confine like this mode, and if you can control this thickness, you can think of also different type of modes also. This kind of optical mode, fundamental mode, it is called here TE0, TE1, first order mode, and then TE0 and TE1 together. This adding together, you can have this type of modes. Actually, this type of number of modes you can control by controlling the thickness of the surface layer where refractive index you are get increasing, or maybe this layer refractive index or width. By designing the refractive index of the core and cladding as well as thickness, you can actually control the number of modes to be supported here. So that was actually the huge success that experimentally could be demonstrated. Okay. And you know, now people, I just from 1952, I think that is 1972, I'm just giving a blank for about 30, more than 30 years, 35 years. Within them 35 years, what happened to integrated optics? So people started doing all sorts of research so that people, particularly they were focused on finding a particular platform similar to silicon. What has been done in silicon, like in electronics industry, people were in a search to find a substrate or platform where you can integrate laser, you can integrate very well the waveguide, you can integrate modulator so that electrical to optical conversion can take place easily, and also you need to integrate photodetector so that optical to electrical conversion can take place. So all these things, if we can find a silicon-like material for optics, then one can go for integrated optical circuits and with almost similar functionalities, right? So people started finding, obviously they started silicon. Silicon was failed at that time because material was not that much optical quality on the top of it. Its color, if you see silicon color is gray, that means the visible light is just absorbing, it is not transparent. So that was not so interesting. Then obviously people tried glass. So glass, I think it's a kind of, if you can change, probably you can change the waveguide, you can make waveguide, but active material, how to integrate laser, how to integrate modulator, how to integrate photodetector, all those failed. People also demonstrated different type of polymer also, polymer waveguide, but that is up to the waveguide level. And maybe slow tuning, all those type of things. Some of the passive components people demonstrated, and some success also got as a standalone device. Standalone device like, but standalone devices kept on coming, but they are all demonstrated in different platform, different technology. No universal technology was established to demonstrate all these photonic optical components on same platform. That was actually a huge problem. People are in search how to find that. So here you see this is a review paper. It was published in 2008. Amnon Yarib, who is we consider as a father of optoelectronics, and he was writing a paper, and he was just nicely, you can just read this thing nicely, he was demonstrating how modulator was invented by him first in gallium arsenide, but the credit goes to his friend, another colleague, is Ivan Camino, because he demonstrated modulator in lithium niobate. That is one ferroelectric crystal where he could actually demonstrate very high speed modulator, and experimental demonstration happened. But idea was he said that it is his, but he demonstrated, he got the success, and till 2000 he said that the only success was for integrated optics is the modulator, standalone modulator, which was being used for long haul communication, high speed communication for fiber optics, fiber optical communication. And some other discrete components were there, like array waveguide gating structure came out in indium phosphide platform for multiplexing or demultiplexing different channels. But still 2000, actually, it was a huge setback, not able to find a uniform, a universal technology platform so that you can integrate many components together and you can realize certain things. And before that, I was talking about that electronics industry were struggling, okay? And okay, so this in the same year 2008, just I'm talking about 12 years, 13 years ago, another review paper was published by this his friend, Yarib's friend, I.P. Camino, and he was optical integrators and the personal perspective he was writing, and he was saying that, well, I think it is now time to look for silicon, looking into the advancement of silicon, so-called silicon as a good optical material. In the meantime, material properties, substrate quality, all those type of things came out, and a lot of people started working on silicon. He said that, well, all finding a universal material and all optical integrated optical circuit is a problem, and people were thinking about people also struggling for electronics and silicon. So if we go for silicon photonics, then actually probably you can actually compensate whatever the bottleneck for electronics that can be compensated by implementing photonic circuit also together, and it's going in a right directions. And he himself, who once upon a time thought that lithium niobate could be a platform or maybe silicon of optics world, what was done for electronics in silicon, that same thing could be done in lithium niobate. Once upon a time he was believing, and a lot of people was working. Myself also, my PhD work was also in lithium niobate, and then it was moved to silicon slowly, and he said that silicon is the solution, silicon photonics is the solution. Okay, so I just want to go for how silicon photonics also came out, some type of historical background I want to bring in front of you, so that you can appreciate more about that the subject is really good, and you are taking the course, and you will be able to appreciate this course also. So you know that's today I will just discuss maybe one or two slides, and then I take one more class for how silicon photonics came into picture. So you know that electronics, silicon, known for it, and CMOS technology, you know, for all logic gates, implementation, etc. You need some kind of CMOS circuitry where actually you are having some kind of complementary MOS structure. One is NMOS and another is PMOS. They will be fabricated side by side so that you can get all the particularly on-off logic, 0 and 1 logic you can implement. And if you fabricate such a device in a simple bulk silicon, then what happens? There is always a chance that some kind of leakage will be there. I think all this is all about your electronics. I'm not going into the details, but one problem is that that's leakage to the substrate is a loss. So you cannot get really efficient circuit, cost-effective, power-effective electronic circuit together. That's why people were slowly moving to demonstrate SOI CMOS. SOI means silicon on insulator CMOS. So what is that? You have silicon substrate, and then you will have a insulator layer, that is silicon dioxide, and then you will have a device layer, which is silicon. So top layer will be a thin silicon layer up to 100 nanometer or so. And if you can produce that type of wafer, that means you have silicon and the layer, and then some oxide layer, that is the insulating layer, and then on the top another device layer. Instead of just going for silicon wafer, if you have some kind of silicon on insulator wafer, this type of leakage problem can be solved, because from the substrate your device layer is separated by a insulator, which actually oppose any leakage current. Okay, so that is how this SOI thing came in, and around 2000 good quality SOI technology came out with the hand of electronics industry like Intel, IBM, all those type of people started working, and good quality SOI wafers also coming out that time around 1990s or so. So till 2000 it was growing, and then people came out with this type of idea that if you are having a SOI, silicon and insulator electronics, and you can easily, I will come to that point, you can easily fabricate optical waveguide, as well as you can fabricate your modulator, and you can fabricate photodetector, you can have electronics, everything is there, and communication can be established instead of like this type of layer via whatever I discussed here earlier. People can think of where you need a little bit of longer distance communication, where electrical interconnect is having some kind of bottleneck. So what you could do, you can have a laser source that can be off chip, because silicon cannot support laser, though a lot of research going on to integrate laser on silicon. And then in silicon substrate you can have a modulator where the light signal can come, and that modulator actually nothing but it is actually converting electrical data into optical data, and optically you process, you have a waveguide can bring to a certain length with a speed of light and frequency, bandwidth, everything you can enjoy here, and then convert into photodetector, that means optical to electronic conversion, and then you can get your electrical data, you can amplify, you can process into another electrical logic cell. So wherever the problem of these interconnects comes, that interconnect portion actually you can have, you can co-integrate with the electronics, and then you can actually overcome all the electronics bottlenecks. So thing is that it looks very simple, that you have to convert electrical signal into optical signal, and then optical signal process it a bit of optically, and then transmit to a distance location and convert back. But this thing need an entire ecosystem of technology again to develop, because you need laser, all these optics, optical waveguide, optical processing circuitry, all those type of things. So that is actually another emerging technology, or what do you call that, supporting technology you need. And the thing is that people just sketched artistically, you see something like that. If you have a SOI, silicon on insulator, you can actually couple light from the outside, since laser cannot be supported in electronics. Some kind of grating coupler structure, if you make like that, then light will be coming. And if you have something like this type of structure, silicon, surrounding is oxide, then this type of cross section, you know, silicon refractive index is higher compared to silicon dioxide. So this silicon can be considered as a core, as long as the electromagnetic wave is not getting absorbed by the band gap electron transmission. So you have to choose like that. So this can be core, and this can be waveguide, and then you can integrate some kind of metal here, so that you can control the refractive index locally wherever you need. And then you can have a transistor, SOI transistor, as I mentioned earlier, and you can have a modulator like this. I will discuss that later. What is that? So that is actually your what do you call that? You have a waveguide like structure here, little bit reef structure where light can be confined, and both sides you can have p-type doping, n-type doping, so that you can control the refractive index by injecting carrier into the waveguide. controlling carrier, free carrier, actually, you can actually change the real part of the refractive index as well as imaginary part of the refractive index. And that function you can manipulate to demonstrate the modulator. And of course, photo detector, germanium also CMOS compatible, germanium detector can be done, and then it's a co-integration which is possible. So that is how actually, as the review suggests that, Yarib's Camino suggests that till 2000 only modulator was the success story and some discrete components. But just to help electronics industry, people came out, and particularly optics community, they got some kind of revival. They got a new life that, okay, this is the area, all the things we have been developing so far, all the optical processing, theory, development, everything, now can be concentrated just to help where is the electrical interconnects failing, just to develop optical interconnect. And that is how silicon photonics technology evolved. The technology, particularly that particular topic subject, came into picture. Okay, so I stop here. I need one more lecture just to complete this background and how the integrated optics or photonic integrated circuit came in, and then I will go back to our actual course content. Okay, I stop here. Thank you very much. If you have questions, you can please ask. Otherwise, I can log out.